Okay, so I've now spent plenty of time with the iPhone 13 series. I've made full in-depth reviews on all 4 models already, and I've compared them to last year's phones too. But what about if you know you want to get a new iPhone 13, but you're not sure if you need the Pro or the regular version? Which one is actually better? The obvious answer is the Pro. It's a 13 but with some extra power and features, right? Well, very simply, yes, that's true. But when you consider the price increase to get those extra features, is it actually better in terms of value? This video will answer that very question, and we'll be discussing all of the differences between the two phones to see whether you actually need the Pro. So first off is the design. These phones have exactly the same dimensions, the same bezels, and the new smaller notch, so they look the same from the front. But the Pro has a shiny stainless steel frame compared to the 13's matte aluminium frame. Now, I'd actually say the regular 13 looks better because it's not such a massive fingerprint magnet. However, the steel offers better scratch resistance and is therefore more durable. There's the obvious difference in the camera bump, which is far bigger and thicker on the Pro. But the main benefit for me is that lovely frosted glass back. I think this looks nicer than any of the glossy 13s, and certainly feels a lot nicer in the hand. But this, the appearance and the durability differences ultimately don't matter if you're going to stick the phone inside of a case anyway. Colour options is another distinguishing feature, and is of course entirely subjective, though I'd personally say the Blue 13 and the Silver Pro are the best looking iPhones this year. Something you will certainly notice is the extra weight of the Pro. 30 grams might not sound like much, but you can really feel this. Now, I said these look the same from the front, but there are some important display differences. A minor one is that the Pro gets a little bit brighter outdoors, reaching 1000 nits versus 800. Now, will you notice this difference? Probably not. You only really reach these numbers outdoors in bright sunlight. You can't just turn the brightness up to max yourself and see a difference. So although the Pro can technically go brighter outdoors, you typically won't see the advantage, and certainly not indoors. The major display difference is ProMotion, the 13 Pro's high refresh rate display. This is the feature that the tech enthusiast might tell you makes the Pro much better than the regular 13, and if you compare the phones side by side, you can definitely see the benefit of the Pro's super smooth scrolling. Animations are smoother too, and it does enhance the experience for sure, also unlocking high refresh rate gaming. But if you give the Pro to the average user and ask them what's different, would they be able to tell the difference on their own? From my experience, it was only after I pointed out the difference that people started to notice. I think ProMotion is the sort of feature that is a subtle improvement at first, but once you've used it for a while and become used to it, you really notice when you switch back to 60Hz screens. So if you're upgrading from a high refresh rate phone, the 13 may feel more sluggish. But unless you know you like high refresh rate screens, if you're just an average user and wouldn't need a high refresh rate game, I honestly wouldn't worry about it. So what about performance? Well, both phones get Apple's new A15 Bionic, you know, the fastest CPU in the world. But the Pros get a 5-core GPU compared to the 13's 4 cores, along with 6 gigs of RAM versus 4. And if you look at the numbers, you can actually see a fairly substantial gain for the graphics performance. So the Pros do offer more power when it comes to productivity tasks and things like gaming, and I actually found the regular 13 was a bit hotter at the end of a long gaming session, so that might be noteworthy to some of you. But do you really need the Pro's extra GPU power? This one is really easy to answer, because if you're sat there not sure if you need the Pro's extra power or not, you don't need it. The difference is small enough that you'd have to be a high-end performance user who needs to squeeze every drop of power from the phone. So you'll already know before watching this video if you need the Pro's better graphics performance. The video editors, those into high-end mobile gaming, sure, the Pro is for you. For everyone else, the regular 13 is going to be just as fast in basically everything you do. Opening apps, load times, animations, it's all going to be super fast whichever phone you go for. And since iOS is the same for these phones, the experience using them feels almost identical. Storage is another small difference between the phones, and while they both now start at 128GB, you can only get the huge 1TB option on the Pros. So if you take a ton of photos and videos, or will keep your phone for many years, you may want to consider that option. The other performance aspect to consider is battery life, and things get a little weird and interesting here. So Apple claimed that the Pros offer more battery life than the regular 13s, 22 hours for video playback versus 19, for example. But I didn't see this difference myself. I even tested video playback side by side, and the batteries were within a couple of percent of each other. The same thing happened when pushing the phones hard during the performance testing. They were pretty much evenly matched. The weird part is that the regular 13 has a bigger battery inside, so if anything, you'd expect it might come out on top. Maybe Apple just wants us to think the Pro has the superior battery simply because it's the Pro model. But essentially, you can consider the battery life to be the same with these phones, which, if you haven't seen from my other videos, is very impressive battery life. I'm often ending the day with a solid 40% remaining with normal use, so these are both awesome phones for battery life. Charging the phones remains exactly the same. The super convenient MagSafe, that's the same. Fast charging via a lightning cable, the same. Having no charger in the box, yep, that's the same too. But if you've watched my other iPhone videos, then you'll already know which charger I'd recommend to you, and that's the new Anker Nano Pro. This tiny 20-watt USB-C charger amazingly packs enough power to charge your iPhone at the maximum speed, and it's my top pick for a fast charger for your new phone. It's actually 45% smaller than Apple's stock charger, and yet has the power to charge your iPhone 3 times faster than those original chargers the phones used to come with. Nano Pro is packing Anker's all-new safety system, Active Shield, which combines a dynamic temperature sensor with a power tuner chip, so the charger will actively monitor temperature and regulate the power output accordingly to give you the fastest but safest charge. It also features Anker's PowerIQ 3 tech, which means it has universal compatibility to work with Android phones, tablets, and your other devices too, so it's pretty versatile. It comes in 4 fresh finishes: Cool Lavender, Arctic White, Glacier Blue, and Black Ice. So you can choose a combination to suit your style, and I'll leave a link down below if you're interested in getting one. Now let's get into the big one, which is of course the cameras. First and foremost, the Pro has an extra lens compared to the 13, a telephoto lens, and I'll show you the benefit this brings to zoomed photography. It also has a LiDAR sensor, which helps with low light situations. I'll show this off too. But unlike in previous years, the main and ultra-wide lenses are completely different between the 13 and 13 Pro. So you've actually got entirely different rear cameras, which makes things more interesting. Despite these tech spec differences though, real-world testing shows us that, actually, you'll barely notice any difference with the main lenses. For the vast majority of situations and subjects, especially with good lighting, the phones are almost identical and there's no clear winner. The combo of main lens and good lighting is what people typically use most, and for this, there's no need to spend more on the Pro. It's the software that plays a much bigger part in the image quality, and both phones get the new ISPs and features like Smart HDR4, which is why the difference from last year's phones is much greater than between the 13 and 13 Pro. With the ultra-wide, again, very similar performance most of the time, but I did notice how the different lenses result in different distortion effects for close-up subjects. These shots were actually taken with the phones in the exact same position. With low light and night mode, there's typically not a huge difference in image quality, but there are more situations where the Pro pulls ahead. Here you may see the Pro image is ever so slightly brighter, perhaps because of the f1.5 aperture versus 1.6, but still no obvious advantage. Sometimes zooming into night mode shots though lets you see how the image is sharper or slightly less noisy with the Pro. But more useful than that is how much faster the Pro can autofocus in low light thanks to the LiDAR sensor. That for me is the Pro's biggest advantage in low light. The wider aperture on the Pro's ultra-wide has given a slightly brighter image here too, and I noticed small things like the extra detail in the floor on this bridge. LiDAR also improves low-light video. You may remember this video test from my other reviews, and it shows how the new Sensor Shift OIS massively improves stability compared to the 12 series phones that don't have this. But LiDAR means that the Pro can find and maintain focus a lot quicker than the 13. If I pause here, you can see the difference in sharpness, because the 13 wasn't able to focus as well. When both phones are able to focus, there's little to separate them. You can perhaps just see that the sky is slightly brighter with the Pro video, again likely due to the wider aperture. Another Pro camera benefit brought over from previous iPhones is Apple ProRAW, which I think is one of the most underrated camera benefits the Pro iPhones have. I actually made a whole video on ProRAW and how the extra metadata captured can make a huge difference when it comes to editing your photos. So this could be one of the better reasons to get the Pro's camera over the regular iPhone 13. This is far beyond your typical Instagram edits, so I can understand if the average user doesn't need to use RAW, but that's exactly why the 13 Pro isn't for the average user. ProRAW just gives you so much more choice in post, especially when it comes to minimizing noise and rescuing detail in the shadows. The next camera difference is with portrait mode, where the Pro's extra lens and again LiDAR can help to improve portraits. It enables night mode portraits, for example. The extra lens and sensor can help with the depth effect and the cutout, as you can see here. But often the 13 can do just as good a job. Here for instance, the portrait effect is just as good as on the Pro, proving that the extra lens and sensor aren't always essential. The Pro does have an advantage though in letting you take portraits on the telephoto lens, and with this 77mm focal length, photographers may argue that this is more appropriate for portraits anyway. The Pro's telephoto lens brings the most obvious difference between these two cameras, and it gives the Pro a clear advantage when it comes to zoom quality. The regular 13 has to digitally zoom in, which quickly decreases image quality and can only go up to 5 times zoom. The Pro can optically zoom 3 times with no loss in quality, so the sharpness and detail are much better and the zoom can max out at 15x instead. So this one is pretty simple. If you want to do any kind of zoomed photography, the 13 Pro is the clear winner. This applies to the other end of the zoom range too, because the Pro also gets the new macro mode for super close-up photography and videos. This feature is baked into the ultra-wide lens, which the bigger sensor makes possible, and you're not able to get this close on the regular 13. It's a pretty cool feature, but it's not something I use very often, so I wouldn't personally miss it too much if I had a 13 instead. As for the video quality, there's very little to separate the two phones, especially in good lighting where you'll struggle to see any difference at all. As we've seen, it's only really in low light where the Pro has an advantage. The new cinematic mode is the same on both phones too, and you get all the same tools for capturing and editing live or in post, so no difference there. The only video difference is the new ProRes format, which only the Pros can record in. Again, this is a feature that if you don't already know if you need it or not, you don't need it. The format offers high colour fidelity and low compression, but to most people this just means video that takes up much more storage on your phone. So it's something that 99% of people will ignore, but may be useful for professionals using a ProRes setup. And finally, if you're wondering about the front cameras, these are identical and the performance and features are all exactly the same. The one exception is that the Pros have the ProRes video format available on this lens too, but not even the Pros will use this on the front lens much. Otherwise, selfies, portraits and video are all the same. So you can see that the Pro does have some advantages over the regular 13, and it's clear that it has the better camera system overall. If you're quite serious about smartphone photography, or perhaps you just need those macro, night mode or telephoto benefits, then the Pro will be the obvious choice for you. In fact, the camera, out of all features, is still the biggest reason to get a 13 Pro over a 13. But I just feel like most of these advantages are in the more niche areas of photography. They're not really the sort of things the average user would benefit from. Maybe you'll have seen a particular feature you like, or there's a scenario in which you know you'll want the Pro. But for most situations, the 13 can match the Pro, so the camera will be more than good enough for most people. The final thing to consider then is the price. The regular 13 starts at $799, whilst the Pro starts at $999, and this price difference is the reason why I've downplayed a lot of the Pro's benefits throughout this video. Don't get me wrong, I love the iPhone 13 Pro. It's clearly the better phone overall, and it's actually the one I would personally choose of these two. However, it doesn't obviously justify that extra $200. I would get it as a tech enthusiast in spite of that, not because of it. The truth is that the regular 13 is just such a great phone already, and I think the Pro would need to have much more important benefits over it in order to fully justify it. Perhaps a much better battery life, for example, which we've seen it doesn't have. So unless you can identify a specific aspect you need in the Pro, you could end up paying extra for features you won't use or benefit from. So the iPhone 13 offers better value for money and is the phone I'd recommend to most people. And to answer our question, do you need the 13 Pro? Probably not. But maybe you simply prefer the design of the Pros. Maybe you love that high refresh rate display or need the huge 1TB of storage. Or maybe you're just like me and are happy to spend more to get those nice little extras anyway. Let me know in the comments section though which of these phones you think offers better value for money. Are you going for the regular 13 or do you need the Pro? Remember that I've also got in-depth videos on the 13 mini and 13 Pro Max, as well as how these phones compare to last year's 12 series if you're wondering about that. So I'll leave links to those down below. I've got an awesome MagSafe accessories video coming up very soon for all of you iPhone 12 and 13 users, so make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss that one. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.